Hey everyone, let the spoilers begin. Zendikar Rises is fast approaching, and we are starting out here with Nahiri, Heir of the Ancients, a 4-mana planeswalker with 4 loyalty. Her +1 creates a 1/1 knight, and you can attach an equipment you control to it. Expect this to be seeing play alongside of all sorts of equipment. You've got that Titan's Hammer or whatever it is, the 1 casting cost, +10/+10, which people will likely try and do. A lot of these cards, thanks to Commander, will have a home outside of Standard. I almost feel like at this point, most people don't even care about Standard. It's just kind of like a thing that some other people do. And it helps kind of hone in on some of the better cards. Certainly the most competitive minds are going to be playing Standard and shed some light on what's good and what's bad. But, you know, for the most part, it seems like people are mostly excited about how these cards are going to interact with Commander, and then of course in my area with Legacy. A lot of what we do is Legacy, so when I see cards like this, that's the type of lens that I'm going to be looking through them with for the most part. The -2, you look at the top 6, you can reveal a warrior or equipment and put them into your hand. A little bit of card advantage, and then the -3, so she comes ready to do this right away. It deals damage to target creature or player equal to twice the number, or creature or planeswalker equal to twice the number of equipment you control. So gonna go ahead and clear a permanent if you've already got a bunch of equipment. Not the easiest thing to do outside of a deck like Cheerios, which isn't gonna want a forecasting cost planeswalker, but I expect people will have some fun with this Nahiri. Oh, wrong way. Jace, Mirror Mage, a 3 casting cost, again, 4 loyalty planeswalker, this time with Kicker, meaning that if you kicked it, when he enters the battlefield, you actually get a copy of Jace Mirror Mage, except it's not legendary, and its starting loyalty is 1. So much easier to shatter that second copy. However, this one you can +1 to scry 2 or 0 to essentially Dark Confidant. You're going to reveal the top card of your library, but you are drawing it. Sorry, let me be precise here, because this does matter in Magic. You're going to draw a card and reveal it. Remove a number of loyalty counters equal to that card's converted mana cost from Jace. So, interesting decision that they made it a card draw when it's pretty similar to Dark Confidant, where you reveal and then add it to your hand. And, you know, you're going to get at least a couple of cards off of this for 3 mana. For 5 mana if you've kicked it. And if it's just not kicked, then there's a good chance you're going to get at least a couple of cards. Overall, this, I guess, feels worse than original Baby Jace. That one you would get 3 cards off of as long as you were protecting it. And, I mean, you could potentially get tons of cards off of this with library manipulation, putting lands on top and all, but it'd probably be a fine card in Standard. People do like Jace, and we'll see what he ends up doing. Shell Shield. Target creature you control gets +0/+3, and if it was kicked, they also gain hexproof until end of turn. Probably be fine in limited. Wouldn't have been completely insane for this just to be a single blue to do the same thing. I believe we've actually seen that in recent years, +0/+3 and hexproof for 1. Valakut Awakening, 3 mana, instant, to put any number of cards from your hand on the bottom of your library, then draw that many cards +1. However, if you want, you can actually play this as a Valakut Stoneforge. So this can enter the battlefield tapped and tap for red mana, so something that can either let you dig or just be a mana source. Kind of an interesting new take on Transform, and it's going to be fun to see how else they've factored that in to this set. I mean, there's so much design space when you're talking about using the back of the cards, like literally like doubles your design space. Ruin Crab, I think this is actually my favorite card of the set so far for reasons that might not be obvious. So I love Hedron Crab, and some people might feel like, oh, well, why wouldn't they just reprint Hedron Crab? I actually love that they didn't. So Ruin Crab is almost a reprint. When a land enters the battlefield under your control, each opponent mills 3. So for Commander players looking to kind of mill everybody out, this will probably be better, which is nice. However, it doesn't just crush the value of Hedron Crab. That card has been built up a little bit. It's got a nice little value going, and I think a reprint in a standard booster would essentially just wipe out the value of that card. So I personally love to see this. If people want to go crab tribal, have a blast with it. So I'm actually in favor of this type of quasi reprint where you're giving new functionality, a slightly different twist on things, and to be the Thoughtseize compared to a Duress, for example, potentially allows you to go with 8 copies of that main deck. And they did a fancy treatment with Hedrons on it. What's not to love? Marasa Root Grazer, a 2 casting cost, 2/3 with Vigilance. Totally solid for limited from a historical perspective. And you can tap to put a basic land from your hand onto the battlefield. So I expect this card to be very, very good in limited. Of course, not only are you ramping, but you're also potentially getting landfall triggers at very awkward times for your opponent where they wouldn't necessarily have to play around them otherwise. Just the ability to have this guy back and slam down a land and get a cascade of different landfall triggers can be pretty tricky. And of course, returning a basic land you control to its owner's hand allows you to just repeatedly get use out of landfall. I expect this one to be very solid for limited. Bloodchief's Thirst. For 1 black, you destroy target creature or planeswalker with converted mana cost 2 or less, but if you've kicked it, you just destroy any target creature or planeswalker. It's an interesting card. I don't know what formats this might see play in. I mean, there's definitely times where you just want cheap removal, and Fatal Push is, I guess, going to be better always. So formats where you can't play Fatal Push sounds like just standard, but also limited. Going to be totally fine in limited. 4 mana to destroy a creature or planeswalker. And I guess destroying a planeswalker is a nice upside. I mean, Fatal Push can't do that. So yeah, I mean, this is an interesting card. Makes you think a little bit, compare it to existing options. May not kind of supplant any of them, but in Commander, you can only play 1 copy of each card anyways. And if you're in a very competitive scene with a lot of cheaper creatures, that could be of use. Speaking of dangerous, cheap creatures, Lotus Cobra with some new art on it. Now, the original Lotus Cobra art is a fan favorite, so always difficult when you're revisiting that. It looks like, what is this, Sam Rowan did an admirable job with this. It's certainly a beautiful piece. But the landfall from this guy actually has been good enough for vintage play, if you can believe that, with fetch lands accumulating a bunch of extra mana and accelerating blue-green hybrid aggro control strategies in the past to pretty good heights. And we also have a new take on it with this more stylized art, which we've been seeing a bunch of in Magic the Gathering. They have been doing, tattoos, psychedelic-looking cards, just very bright and colorful. And I actually love it. I love the fact that they're doing it. Now, this particular aesthetic is not to my taste, but I love the fact that they're doing it and giving people options. I am a big fan of that, and I think that's actually a really important part of the game, is not falling into just a cookie cutter kind of definition of art direction where you're able to explore different styles of art. And I'm a big fan of that. I know they've been doing that in the secret layers, and of course now we're seeing this even more in these standard set releases. Omnath, Locus of Creation. He is at 4 colors here and just getting more and more colors each time, right? He started out green, then red-green, and then Naya, and now he's whatever the name of this. It's not a wedge. I don't know what you call a 4-color combination. Let me know in the comments if that actually has a widely agreed upon name. So this guy, I'm liking right off the bat. When he enters the battlefield, you draw a card. Nothing wrong with that. That's excellent. Landfall, when a land enters the battlefield under your control, you gain 4 life if it's the first time. If it's the second time, you get 4 mana in his casting cost. And then if it's the third time, it deals 4 damage to each opponent and each planeswalker you control. So your first 3 landfalls per turn each have kind of a cascading, interesting effect. I think this guy's going to be a fan favorite. All of the other Omnaths have been, and I guess we're just going to have to wait and see his final form. Here is another take on him with this etched version, I believe they're calling. Very colorful. Shepherd of Heroes, 5 casting costs, 3/4. When it enters the battlefield, you gain 2 life for each creature in your party. So this is a new mechanic. Party is part of Magic now, and your party consists of up to 1 each of Cleric, Rogue, Warrior, and Wizard. So if you have 4 creatures on board, a Cleric, Rogue, Warrior, and Wizard, then you are going to be gaining 8 life, which makes this card a tremendous value. We'll see how that all plays out in terms of assembling a party and keeping them around. And I'm guessing, let me know if I'm wrong on this, this is just shooting from my knowledge of Magic, for each creature in your party consists of up to 1 each of Cleric, Rogue, Warrior, and Wizard. I don't know what happens when you have something that's all 4. I guess you would just have a 1-man party if you had a Changeling. Let me know if I'm wrong on that. Acquisitions Expert. When it enters the battlefield, target opponent reveals a number of cards in their hand equal to the number of creatures in your party. You choose one of those cards. That player discards that card. Now that I'm looking at that wording, you know what? I'm going to take a look. I think the number of creatures in your party, like if you have 1 creature and it has all those 4 types, I feel like you only have 1 creature. So I'm going to go ahead and check on that, not to leave you guys hanging, and I will pause the video shortly. You will not even notice. So yeah, it actually is counting the total number of creatures. So if you had a Changeling, that would only count as 1, and you would just say it's a Wizard or a Cleric or Rogue, or it doesn't actually matter. And apparently you can't do it wrong. It's always going to be calculated correctly for you. So if you did, for example, have a Wizard Cleric and wanted to count that as a Cleric, and you had another creature that was only a Cleric, you wouldn't be able to. You would have a Cleric and a Wizard. So you'd have 2 in your party. Tazri, Beacon of Unity, 5 casting costs, 4/6. Costs 1 less to cast for each creature in your party. And then look at that activated ability. A whole bunch of mana symbols there, making her a potential commander, as it's actually a 5-color card. You look at the top 6 cards of your library, you can reveal up to 2 Cleric, Rogue, Wizard, Warrior, and or ally cards from among them and put them into your hand, put the rest on the bottom in any order. So that is, I think, a card that people will have fun with in Commander. Pretty expensive activated ability, but once you get going, you're talking about playing this for 1 mana and having an activated ability that costs 4 to potentially ramp into all sorts of shenanigans. And this would actually work pretty well at Changelings, just fishing Changelings out of your deck. Linvala, she is back, this time as Shield of the Seagate, a 3/3 flyer for 3. And back in the day, that would mean there's going to be some type of horrifying drawback, but instead, at the beginning of combat on your turn, if you have a full party, you choose target non-land permanent and opponent controls. Until the next turn, it can't attack, block, and its activated abilities can't be activated. On top of that, you can sack her, and then you choose either Hexproof or Indestructible, and then give your creatures that ability until end of turn. So this card is actually really pushed. Solid commander, and the ability to protect your team. If you're trying to build up a board of creatures, you're going to be able to prevent them from being bounced from something like Cyclonic Rift, or you're going to be able to prevent a crushing Wrath of God effect from destroying them. And probably going to be fine for Constructed and Standard at the least. I mean, a 3/3 flyer for 3 with all of that upside. I mean, I'd be surprised if that doesn't find some way of fitting in. Spoils of Adventure. This costs 1 less for each creature in your party, and you gain 3 life and draw 3 cards. So for 2 mana, once you have a full party, you are drawing 3 and gaining 3, which would make this one of the best Magic cards. If it was just 2 mana, draw 3, gain 3, that would be one of the best Magic cards ever printed. So, I mean, getting a party together is no small thing. Anybody that's ever tried to play D&D knows how tough it is to actually get people to show up at game night. I'm sure in-game it's also going to be difficult to get 4 creatures on board consistently. But when it does come together, it is a thing of beauty. Just want to quickly mention that they've kind of snuck in some support for this mechanic already with Outlaw's Merriment. This is a Throne of Eldraine card. I noticed this on our Facebook groups. Somebody had pointed this out, and I think it's pretty cool that we are going to be able to look back and see, because they knew this was coming. And at the beginning of your upkeep, you get a red or white creature at random, and it's going to be a warrior, cleric, or rogue. which is going to be something that could potentially assemble a party in casual play. There's the the full art version of Linvala. Onto these dual lands. So these pathways, Riverglide pathway here comes in as either a blue or a red. Very, very interesting. I think these cards are just really a fun take, essentially, giving you a dual land. Of course, it only taps for one color ever, but you do get the color that you actually need, and they're pretty cool. I think this is a really fun game design. Not an obvious one, in my opinion. Very subtle, and overall, I'm pretty impressed with it. I mean, I know they've struggled with dual-sided cards. It's been a difficult thing for them, but I actually like that a lot. They tend to shy away from doing it because it is a massive pain. But, what else are you guys doing? You're making Magic the Gathering. Make it as good as you can, and I like to see them swinging for the fences. Confounding Conundrum, 2 mana. When it enters the battlefield, draw a card. Whenever a land enters the battlefield under an opponent's control, if that player had another land enter the battlefield under their control this turn, they return a land they control to its owner's hand, really stopping ramp. And the low cost of 2 mana, but it does replace itself. This could be a sideboard card. I wouldn't be surprised. Could be a main deckable card in Commander. Replacing itself is always nice, and kind of putting an end to some of the shenanigans that can happen with multiple lands entering the battlefield and people just getting so far ahead with their mana bases. And it seems to me like most Commander groups are actually pretty anti-Armageddon. Like, I've seen plenty of times where you have a Vandal Blast or some type of destroy all artifacts, like a Meltdown. Like, that doesn't get people as pissed when you blow up all the artifacts, but when you blow up all the lands, that tends to be frowned upon a lot more heavily. And Armageddon tends to be a type of card where people actually just scoop up their lands and the rest of their cards, and they're like, we're not playing with you anymore. And this will kind of set things a little bit more evenly, because a lot of the times it is kind of a social faux pas to blow up all the lands, but at least this way you don't have to just sit by while the green player just ramps unfettered and just ends up with an insane mana base while you're kind of left in the past. We do have full art lands coming in, and I mean, we've got a lot of options now, even from set boosters. So we've got the original Zendikar, Battle for Zendikar, now Zendikar Rising. We had Hour of Devastation, we had Amonkhet, we've got snow-covered basics in full art. Of course, we've got a ton of high-end full art lands, Unhinged, Unglued, kind of in the mid-range, and now we're revisiting them. So the Cup Island, so to speak, one of the more popular original ones. We've got kind of a reimagining of that in some way, and just really a wide range. I'm not going to go over all of the full art basics in this video, just because there's not too much to talk about there. They're back. Presumably they're going to be one in every pack. We can see here card number 280 out of 280 here, rounding out the end of the set. And I think the set's going to do very well. I mean, lands, like sets that are based on lands, tend to do very well long term. And I think we've got that cycle of lands. I'm sure we've got plenty more, but these basics will give a nice little kick. Probably not a ton of value at first. I wouldn't be surprised if you can pick them up off of draft tables from kind of more experienced players that aren't super worried about nickels and dimes. But don't be surprised if, 5 years down the line, if you're getting $1 a piece for those full art lands, especially if there's any that people particularly fall in love with. I mean, that definitely happens within land cycles, is there'll be a land in there that just really catches people's imagination or admiration, and they just really want it. Kabira Outrider, a human warrior. When it enters the battlefield, gets +1/+1 until end of turn for each creature in your party. Kind of telling us that it's very likely this set is going to be about going kind of wide and getting a lot of creatures on board. And, that'd be a solid way to break through, getting a +1/+1 until end of turn for each creature in your party. So this thing comes down, potentially a +4/+4 for 4 mana with a body. And that's a heck of a thing to be flickering in and out or picking up and putting down if you can be returning it to your hand. So that is it for this one. Let me know if you guys enjoy seeing these spoiler breakdowns. There are fetch lands and expeditions, which I am taking a look at to get all of the accurate information about that. There were some rumors swirling around earlier, so I want to make sure that we get that precisely right. That'll come out tomorrow, and we will talk about the differences or the excitement. I do these in one take. I have no way of editing that out. I mean, I do, but I'm not going to. Let's be clear. I could put that in a photo editing process. But if you're with me this long, you've already suffered through enough errors. Let me know if you guys enjoy the video, even with the flubs, or if you prefer that I edit them. Thanks so much for watching. That is all for this one, but don't worry, there is a lot more. You can check out our older videos, and we're always putting out new videos from ELD's Time Vault Games in Bellingham, Massachusetts. If you want to help the channel, of course, you can like, subscribe, share, tap that notification bell so you can know the next time our new videos come out. Thanks for watching.